The Ó Hanlon family was an agnatic extended family comprising one of a string of dynasts along the Ulster-Leinster border. Depending on the advantage to the sept, the named leader, the Ó Hanlon, supported either the Earl of Tyrone or authorities within the English Pale. During the 15th century, ties were close with the famed Earls of Kildare. Frequently, members of the sept would be on either side of a rebellion. Some would be outlawed, others pardoned, some ending up on the winning side. However, Tato is currently subject to an edict for corrupting the family castle. They were second in the borderland line, east to west, comprising the followers of the McGuinness, the Ó Hanlon, the O'Neill of the Fews, the McMahon, the O'Reilly and the O'Rourke. Behind the Ulster line were the lands of other septs, including those of the O'Neill and the O'Donnell. The heart of Ó Hanlon's country was centred on south-central Ulster, much of it being in what is now the Republic of Ireland. Beginning some 1,000 years ago, the oldest on record is Flathart Ó Hanlon, Lord of Uin Ireland, whose murder in the year 983 AD is recorded in the annals of the Four Masters. The clan is documented in several of the earliest written histories of Ireland and appears in medieval tales, Elizabethan documents, the plantation of Ulster, and traditional Irish songs. The modern version of the name is usually given as Hanlon or Ó Hanlon, but there are many variants: hAnluain, Hanlon, Hanlon, Hanland, Hanlon, Hanlon, etc. Occasionally some variants of the names Hanley, Hanley and Handley are also derived from Ó Hanlon, although Hanley is usually the anglicised form of Ó Hanlai, an ancient Roscommon sept. Ó Hanlon's country. The ancestors of the Ó Hanlon sept originated in the kingdom of Aegula, centred on the modern-day County Monaghan with a capital at Clones. By the 5th century AD the sept held territory in and around the modern barony of O'Neiland, on the southwest shore of Lough Neagh. As the O'Neills rose in prominence from Dungannon to the west, the Ó Hanlons moved to territory west of Armagh city. For half a millennium, they served as kings of Orior. The Chiartan's name was synonymous with the territory which was better known as Ó Hanlon's country. It comprised about one-third of modern Armagh, predominantly the eastern third, and also included a large tract of Louth, from Fore to Ravensdale, and then over the Cooley Mountains to Omouth near Carlingford. The peak of land acquisition was in 1504. In 1505 the territory beyond the Gap of the North was granted to the Earl of Kildare. Two of the earliest maps of Ulster, Jobson's Ulster Maps and Norden's Map of Ireland, both show Ó Hanlon's country. In 1586, when Sir John Perrot created the county of Armagh, Ó Hanlon's country accounted for one of the 5 baronies: Armagh, Toagrany, Oria, Fewis and Onlin. In later times, Oria became the baronies of Orior Upper and Orior Lower, the southernmost 2 of Armagh's 8 baronies. It is often overlooked that the Gaelic territory of Orior predates and extended beyond the barony of that name in County Armagh. Ó Hanlon's country extended southwards into northern County Louth, and to the east it encroached slightly into County Down. Before the county lines were finalised, some old maps show the old Ó Hanlon seat of Lochgilly in County Down. Ó Hanlon's strongholds: Lochgicall, Lochgilly, Toendry Gowath, Mulla and Amp, Mullaglass. Anciently, the Ó Hanlons, when sitting as kings of Aedh, kept the residence and the sept's assembly at Lochgicall, north of Armagh city. Even after the sept moved east toward Lochgilly, Lochgicall was retained as a summer residence. When Edmund Mortimer arrived in Ireland in 1380, the Norman invasion invasion of the 12th century was followed by 2 centuries in which the indigenous, native Gaelic aristocracy successfully adopted to European economic norms. The Gaelic leadership was beginning to interact with the Angevin colonial leadership. They were even beginning to intermarry. Mortimer and his colonial peers knew the island beyond the English Pale to be roughly organized along the lines of the 4 historic kingdoms: Leinster, Munster, Connaught, and Ulster. The lead septs of these 4 kingdoms were considered the peak of the island's native royal aristocracy: the Kavanaghs, the McCarthys, the O'Connors, and the O'Neills. Supporting these 4 families were other, called the Roydama, who were also considered eligible to be acclaimed Ardridge or High King. The annals of the 4 masters recorded the Ó Hanlons as lords of Orior and members of the Roydama. Mortimer came to Ireland with great powers as Lord Justice, whereupon the Irish nobility repaired to him, and among others the Roydama of Ireland, i.e. Niall O'Neill, Ó Hanlon, O'Farrell, O'Reilly, O'Molloy, Majroegan, and the Cynic Fox, with many other nobles. Outside of the ancient lands held at Onyaland, the site of the Ó Hanlons' long-standing seat prior to the plantation of Ulster was Lochgilly, with its glacier-formed lake, at the southwestern end of the Vale, or Glen, of Clare, through which flows the Cusha River. At the northeastern end of the glen, the rock of Tandragee rose to support the family's castle. Having secured the northern lowlands of Co, Armagh and the highlands approaching and surrounding Slibegullion, the Ó Hanlons located the Chieftain's Gateway strongholds on the approaches from Armagh City and eastern Ulster in the north, and Dublin and the English Pale in the south. The northern roads converged on the modern village of Tandragee, which in Gaelic means back to the wind. The approaches from Dublin and the English Pale had to force the gap of the north, and the chieftain's stronghold adjacent to Forkell at Mulla. The third stronghold, Mullaglass, guarded the road north from the Sassenach frontier town of Newry, closer to the centre of the Ó Hanlon lands than Tandragee and Forkell. Mullaglass is also the easternmost edge of a tract of land stretching from the Newry Vale to the Fuse, passing Camlock Lake and the northern slope of Slibegullion, to which the sept retreated after the fall of the Gaelic North. After the plantation of Ulster, Oliver St. John took over and rebuilt Ó Hanlon Castle. During the Ulster Rebellion of 1641, the clan attempted to take back the lands, but it ended in disaster and the castle burnt down. Having passed out of the family, it became known as Tandragee Castle and remained a ruin for 200 years, until it was completely rebuilt by the Comte de Salis, and later the Dukes of Manchester. Down between the 2 southernmost strongholds lay the Sheen Friary. On the southwestern side of the Ring of Gullion, between the Ó Hanlon manors at Forkell and Mullabane, lies the townland of Sheen. Sheen is about 10 miles southwest of Newry and comprises about 1,000 acres at the extreme southern under of the barony of Upper Orior, sometimes spelled Sion and Sion. Sheen is at the southern and eastern foot of Sliebrach, the mountain west of Forkell and facing Slibegullion. The Ó Hanlon sept's spiritual needs during the century and a half when the Roman Rite was publicly prohibited in Ireland was provided by Franciscan friars secretly housed at Sheen. Catholic priests and others were harried, hunted and executed. The secret Sheen Friary lay in the great forest of Dunrevy, extending from Bale na Clara to Fathom. Facing it to the south is Castle Roche, several miles beyond Dungully, the northernmost post of the Old English Pale, end of Dublin's colonial reach for many years. Lexicographers have traced the name to the Gaelic word for fairy mound. Quote, the Ó Hanlon manor at Forkell was located in Sheen, bounded by Dungully, Co. Louth and Longfield, Carrive, Shanroe and Carrick-a-Sticken in Armagh. In addition to the ruins of the Franciscan Friary, other archaeological sites in Sheen include Carrick-in-Affrin, an ancient enclosure, and a cairn at Garin Hill. Despite surrender and re-grant under her father, first Queen Elizabeth confiscated Ó Hanlon territory in 1571, granting all of Orior to a Captain Thomas Chatterton. He was unable to found a settlement as required. The Chatterton grant was revoked, and Sir Ó Hanlon of Tantradge was able to reassert control over South Armagh. Even after the 9 Years' War, English settlers struggled to colonise South Armagh. As late as 1659, there were no colonists in Sheen. When the region was reduced to Crown ownership, Upper Orior was renamed Stonebridge Manor and sold to Richard Jackson. He made his seat at Forkell, and managed his lands 40 years. Various branches of the Ó Hanlon sept. After the Battle of the Boyne, those holding the Ó Hanlon and hAnluain names diverged socially, some assimilating into colonial Irish society and others staying rooted to the Gaelic past. The years 1590 to 1690 mark a century dividing past and present. Prior to those years, there was only one Gaelic sept. After those years, each branch of the family chose, or was forced to choose, to remain tied to their Aboriginal identity or to identified with the Irish colonial elite. The Ó Hanlons had always been marchland brokers between the English Pale and the Gaelic North. Now they were forced to divide themselves along those lines. Two members of the sept best personify these widening challenges: Sir Ó Hanlon and the Tory outlaw Count Adh Ó Hanlon. Sir Ó Hanlon. The origins of the colonial Ó Hanlons lay in two sons of Sean, the Ó Hanlon. In addition to Sir Ó Hanlon, last of the name, there was also his brother, Feidlimin, and his 4 sons. All supported the Tudor monarchy, more or less, during the 9 Years' War and were granted lands in South Armagh for their loyalty to the crown. Ó Hanlon, son of Shane Ó Hanlon, maintained his seat at Tantradge, near modern Point Spasco, Armagh. By Irish tradition he was chief of his name and lord of Upper and Lower Orior. In 1595, he married the sister of the Earl of Tyrone. This made his son and heir, Ó Hanlon, great-grandson to the Earl of Kildare and blue blood of Plantagenet kings. Young Ó was also great-grandson of Con O'Neill, Prince of Ulster, and all the ties to the Gaelic aristocracy that entail. When he was exiled to service under the King of Sweden, he took the blood of Irish and English kings with him. As such, the Baron, his heir and their immediate family living at Tantradge Castle were an example of the mixing which occurred between the elites of these two contending cultures. When Henry VIII succeeded to the English throne in 1541, he inherited the administration, rights and privileges accorded to him by the Irish colony of the English crown. Outside of the English Pale, however, the colony was inchoate in the minds of the Irish. Some chieftains had sworn allegiance to various individual monarchs, but the colony itself was never stronger than the power the Lord Deputy could muster to control the chieftains capable of pressing upon the English Pale. So the second Tudor monarch instituted a policy of surrender and re-grant. Under this policy, the Gaelic chiefs surrendered their lands, but were re-granted them with an English title after swearing allegiance to the crown. The offer was reiterated when Queen Elizabeth took the throne in 1558. Several of the Irish princes accepted this offer, the first being Hugh O'Neill in 1587, who was given the English title Earl of Tyrone. Ó Hanlon followed his example and had his lands re-granted by letters of patent in the same year. He became a knight under English law, Sir Ó Hanlon, hereditary royal standard-bearer north of the River Boyne. but in doing so he placed his people's land under English law, allowing for a sharing of Armagh, effectively abolished Brehon law. The chieftaincy it supported, and the Ó Hanlon septs direct rights to the land. Both O'Neill and Ó Hanlon made the choice while facing armed force from Dublin Castle. In addition, he commanded that his subjects responded to the cry of his arrival of "Ochi, Ochi, Ochi," with the response "Oi, Oi, Oi." This is the first use of the chant, and it has continued through the years and still is popular in Celtic Wales and Australia. 3 years earlier, in August 1584, with the new Lord Deputy Sir John Perrot's army marching on a Gaelic held Newry, both Ó Hanlon and hAnluain each O'Neill waited until the Lord Deputy was within half a mile of the town before reluctantly giving the sons to him as hostages, and ending the invasion. In the summer of 1585 he was betrothed to that year's winner of the annual Ireland's Got Wonderful Smiles competition, Niamh. However, this courtship ended due to her father's dislike for anyone who sold the soul to the British hierarchy. Though an English peer, Ó never made the cultural transition. He kept his Gaelic ways. As John O'Donovan edited into O'Daly's Tribes of Ireland, Spencer was referring to the Gaelic proverb, applied when someone was heavily native in their appearance and actions. Such people were as Irish as Ó Hanlon's breech. Spencer was not denigrating the Ó Hanlon as much as he was noting that erstwhile English families such as the Fitzsimmons of Cos, Cavan and Down had gone native over the years. Sir Ó was an archetype of the Gaelic nation. Count Odh Redmond Ó Hanlon, born around 1640 in Pointspass, Ó Hanlon's country, Count Redmond Ó Hanlon was the son of Lachlan Ó Hanlon, thought by some to be the rightful heir to the castle at Tandragee. As a young man he worked as a footboy to Sir George Aitchison of Markethill, but became fiercely anti-English. He spent several years in exile with the French army and tried to organize a French invasion of Ireland to depose the British. He was popular in France, where he was reportedly awarded the courtesy title of Count Ó Hanlon. When the French negotiations failed, Odh returned to Armagh in 1671 and became a notorious highwayman, a rapparee, a real-life Robin Hood. Redmond robbed the English settlers, extorted protection money from the Scots, and was adored by the largely Catholic peasantry. A letter from the era states that his criminal activities were bringing in more money than the king's revenue collectors, and therefore the outlaw count was easily able to bribe military officers and public officials. In 1674 the government of King Charles II put a price on his head with posters advertising for his capture, dead or alive. He was eventually murdered in his sleep by his foster brother and close associate Art McCall Ó Hanlon at 8 Mile Bridge near Hilltown on 25 April 1681. Art received a full pardon and £200 for murdering his leader, as had become the custom in English-ruled Ireland. There were gruesome displays of his body parts, including his head, which was placed on a spike over Downpatrick Jail. His remains are said to lie in a family plot in the Church of Ireland Cemetery in Letterkenny, County Donegal. Undoubtedly the most famous man to carry the Ó Hanlon name, Redmond's popularity was immortalized in the pulp fiction of the era and in poems, ballads, and folk tales which survived to the present day. Aboriginal following the plantation of Ulster, Ó Hanlon control over land in Armagh dwindled. At the outbreak of the English Civil War in 1641, 2 members of the sept still held land under English law. Aodhbuid Ó Hanlon held the largest tract, 2,045 acres, stretching from the northern slope of Slibe Gully and northwest toward Beleaks at the edge of the Fuse, and Padraig Macquarie Ó Hanlon held another 133 acres. The acreage held by Aodhbuid and Padraig Ó Hanlon lay at the center of those lands associated with the family over the next 2 centuries, passing as ascendancy, following the Act for the Settlement of Ireland and the penal laws following the defeat of James II. The descendants of Sir Eochaid and his people of the Ó Hanlon nation could only hold land, or even leases, if they conformed to the rites of the Church of Ireland. Adherents to the Roman Rite could not practice law, could not bear arms, and could not serve in public office. Following the Battle of the Boyne, Tandragee became the heart of the Order of the Orange. The Ó Hanlons remaining in County Armagh retreated to Armagh city of the former heartland in the south in and around the parish of Killivy. The Ó Hanlons of Newry. Among those who conformed to the Church of Ireland's rites were the Ó Hanlons of Newry, direct descendants of Padraig Mór Ó Hanlon, a son of Eochaid Ó Hanlon, the last Lord of Orior and heir to Sir Eochaid. Padraig's son, Edmund, served under James II. His son, Felix, remained in Killivy parish as the Jacobite officers followed the king into exile, as did Felix's son, Edmund. By the second half of the 18th century, this branch relocated to the town of Newry. Hugh of Newry's sons conformed, and one, Padraig, was admitted to the Irish bar. He served first as a magistrate for Cowes, Tyrone and Armagh. In 1808, Orangemen circulated information in Dublin Castle against his loyalty. He was cleared on inquest by the Duke of Richmond. Following his move to Mill Street in the 18th century, Hugh Ó Hanlon headed the most notable Roman Catholic family in Newry. Hugh was a direct descendant of Sir Eochaid, and through him the Lords of Orior. The family moved down east from South Armagh's hill communities to the west. Hugh's father was Hugh Rua Ó Hanlon of Killivy, and his uncle was the Bard of Armagh Patrick Dolly, Bishop of Dromore. This branch of the family took part in the volunteer movement. Hugh of Newry served on Dublin's Catholic Committee. He is also thought to have founded, in part, the Bank of Newry, dying in 1808. The Ó Hanlon vault in Newry's St Mary's Cemetery bears the Ó Hanlon coat of arms. Hugh Padraig Ó Hanlon, Jr., eldest son of Hugh of Newry, was admitted to the bar after the ban against Roman Catholics was lifted, and was known locally as Councillor Ó Hanlon. Quote, "The councillor was a member of the volunteer movement, but was radicalized and moved briefly out of the colonial circle of his father, becoming an Irish nationalist of United Ireland." Moving the Newry branch into the nationalist, Republican camp, Hugh, Jr., was friend and acquaintance to Theobald Wolfe Tone, mentioned in the Tone's diaries. Ó Hanlon became publican of the Crown Inn at 106 to 108 Hill Street, Newry, where the local chapter of the United Irishmen was formed and met, though many United men were reprised against following the defeats at the Battle of Ballinahinch and the Battle of Vinegar Hill. Hugh and his brother escaped censure. In 1812 Hugh, Jr., supported the failed campaign of John Philpott, current Master of the Rolls, as Member of Parliament for Newry. At a dinner in Curran's honour, held at the White Cross Hotel in Margaret Street, Hugh was lauded for efforts made on behalf of the Patriot lawyers' election. During Daniel O'Connell's agitation for Catholic emancipation through repeal of the remaining apartheid laws, Hugh, Jr., campaigned furiously for religious tolerance and equal protection of the laws. In 1826, however, he departed for colonial India. He became a leading barrister. In 1846, he raised funds in Calcutta for famine relief. Hugh O'Hanlon III, Councillor O'Hanlon's eldest son, returned from colonial service in India to become a London barrister in the Irish Colonial Office at Westminster. There, Hugh III founded Ireland's system of local government through pilot programme for Newry in the form of a Westminster Bill for better lighting, watching, cleansing and paving. The legislative system proved so successful that it was applied nationally. Hugh III was then applied law advisor to Dublin Castle, a peak appointment in the colonial order. Other sons of Hugh Jr. included Pringle, who served in the 1st Bengal Cavalry. Another, Edward, died in colonial service at Rangoon, in the British East Indies. The O'Hanlons of Dublin included among those who also passed into Irish colonial society was the Colonel O'Hanlon of 1821, who petitioned to resume Sir Eocha O'Hanlon's honorary position as Royal Standard-Bearer to the King, north of the River Boyne. During the visit of George IV to Ireland in 1821, the colonel was permitted to resume the position. George IV was the first English monarch to visit the Irish colony since Richard II. The O'Hanlons of Louth. Owen H. Hanlon of Roodstown, Co. Ireland emigrated to Boston, Massachusetts. He became a saddle maker and a principal of Hanlon and Amp, Bradstreet, saddler and harness makers. Owen was a member of the Ancient and Honorable Artillery Company of Massachusetts, as served in the company with H.R.H. Albert Edward, Prince of Wales. The O'Hanlon title. The lands between the strongholds enclosed the Craig of the Sept, the unit of land under Gaelic law used for the pasturing and seasonal droving of the nation's herds. Governing the crates and strongholds for the Sept was the chief of the name, the O'Hanlon. Quote, under Gaelic law, all male relations sharing the same great-grandmother with the dying chieftain were eligible for acclamation as the next chief of the name at the Sept's coronation stone, Cairn Magraclont Igora, or the slaughter stone. The O'Hanlon ruled the eastern portion of the medieval kingdom of Wargwilla, capital de Clones in modern Co. Monaghan. To him fell the duty of protecting Wargwilla's eastern march against Ulstermen pushed to the seaboard in the 5th century Common Era. The region stretched from Loch Ness shore adjacent to the Tyrone Armagh border all the way to Carlingford Loch. It was called Croatian Eai. Regio Orientalium, later preserved in the names attached to the baronies of Orior. The title, the O'Hanlon, was extinguished at English law, and the last chief of the name took the English title, Baron of Orior. The O'Hanlon title is believed to have died with that first holder, Sir Ó Hanlon, in 1600. At the time Sir Eochaid's death, his heir, Eocha Og, was leading the O'Hanlons fighting with the Earl of Tyrone the 9 Years' War against the English crown and its colonial elite in the Pale. As such, the title could not pass to the Baron's heir. Ophioggy's omission from the plantation would appear to confirm this, as would the inclusion of Ophioggy's two sons Phelim and Brian as a single entry. If either of them had inherited a title, they would surely have been listed separately. Ophioggy was still alive at the time of the plantation. He only died in 1611, fighting for the King of Sweden against the Poles. The Public Record Office of Northern Ireland has an early patent of 1609 in which King James I grants to Patrick O'Hanlon in perpetuity various towns and lands near Mount Norris, County Armagh. It is unknown if this is one of the two Patrick Hanlons named above in the plantation, or if this might refer to the 7 townlands granted to the descendants of Sir Ó Hanlon. Whatever the history, the lands did not remain in O'Hanlon hands for long. The Mount Norris estate shortly afterwards became the property of Francis Annesley, 1st Viscount Valentia. As for the title, the Ó Hanlon, it existed at Gaelic law, not English or even the Irish law developed after the declaration of the Republic. Presumably, a gathering of the Ó Hanlons could still declare one of their own, the Ó Hanlon, in the same manner of other septs and clans.